Hey Creagears, Roboy here, and welcome back to the second video in this little Return of the Mammalians MEGAmiibo series. Fair, but what else do you want to call it? And also, doesn't this also continue from the Squid Sisters and Captain 3 custom amiibo videos? So, with that fixed, now comes the question of which one to do first. The highly detailed shark or the way too big box? Sounds good. I'll get started on the 3D printer and... Dang it. Stupid fin walls. Well, I guess I'm just going to have to fix that in Blender and get another one going. In the meantime, I can at least get started on the other parts of this MEGAmiibo, Master Mega. Oh, that's gonna be a thing, isn't it? And since we did not want to spend 20 bucks on a full container of epoxy clay to cover this massive shark, we decided to cover the aluminium base we made with air drying clay instead. Thanks to this, we did have to leave Master Mega to dry for a bit longer than we would have with epoxy clay, since with air drying clay, the thicker some parts are, the slower they harden. After we got the clay coat for Master Mega finished, the next piece to make was the ink slide that will be underneath Master Mega. Since the mission of this series is to make each MEGAmiibo embody the boss battle for each idol, for Master Mega we wanted to combine the pose of Shiver sitting on top of Master Mega at the start of the battle, and one of his attacks during the fight, specifically the one where he slides across the arena. Since I think the laser is gonna be a bit too much, even for me. So with this aluminium base on top of an aluminium foil platform, to make for easier removal later, we covered this in air drying clay. During this, we can easily follow the base shape that we had made with the aluminium foil if we keep the sheets to the same thickness. Then we just smooth out each little part onto one another, create a nice even coating. But at the tips of the waves, I wanted to add a little bit more clay to exaggerate the shapes of the waves. Then, using a lot of water, we can already smooth out the clay a lot. And this we can then continue by sanding the clay once it had dried with some 800 grit sandpaper for an extra smooth finish. Both on the waves and to Master Mega himself. Thanks a lot, Mina. Always a fun part of these projects. At least afterwards I can use my airbrush to apply the black primer onto Master Mega. And a white primer for Shiver. Sadly, we cannot start with the painting yet, since we still have the accessories to add to the shark. Stuff like these jet engines, which I made from a 20mm wooden dowel that I sanded these curved edges into, combined with a truncated EVA foam tip for the other side. Then on the wooden end, I made a 10mm hole. Then on this thin edge from the drill and the curved edges, I then score in these teeth with this triangle shaped file. After which I superglue these two truncated cones as steps towards this final pointed end for the jet engines. Finally, we finished off the engines by scoring in the fans and the propeller at the front using a wood burner and also a filter mask. Please be safe when you're doing this kind of stuff. Then we add the coffee stirring sticks that we had matched to the curve of the motor. to combine it with these pads that we glue to the sides of Master Mega, after which we can then add the stirring sticks into a slit that we had cut into the pad to complete the jet engines. Next, I would love to explain in all of the details on how we made the seat that Shiver sits in, but for this part of the project, I just collected a lot of stuff from my dioramas and miniature baskets and used whatever fit the shape of the part that I wanted to make best. There wasn't really a rhyme or reason to it, at least the making parts. I did try to think of how to separate the parts of the seat into some logical pieces, like the seat itself, the base, how I would make the tanks on the side, how I would make the stir, how I would make the wheel. But besides that, I just tried to think of the best materials that would be able to cover the shapes required for the pieces and started to cut, saw, file and glue each piece to one another. This created stuff like, for example, how I used my thickest 30mm wide aluminium wire to get the pipes that go around the back of the seat, since this would not be able to be made with like a bamboo skewer. And then we could also use this for the pipes of the handlebars, gluing one to the fork of the seat, and the other one is then glued into Shiver's hand, to make the assembly a lot easier, since then we did not have to mess with the 3D printed figure anymore. And this is gonna be especially handy, since by the time we actually do the assembly, Shiver would have been painted already, so if something breaks, that messes up with the paint job. But all of this mess then leaves us with this fine interpretation of the seat, which we then immediately use as the starting point for the belts that go around Master Mega. First, we glue the seat right behind the dorsal fin. Then we glued both ends towards the pads of the engines and cut this flush. Then we take these cut off bits and continue on the other side of the engine. These will then go over the belly, but first we add one of these belt buckles. These I'd made from 2mm EVA foam that I'd cut to the shape of the belt buckle and then I folded it onto itself. Then I added some little side walls to finish up this big piece. Then I'd made the other side with a rectangle of 5mm EVA foam and a little square bamboo skewer as a spacer. Then these were glued onto each other and now these will be glued to the belts. On the other side of the buckle, we then continue with the belt towards the other pad on the other side of the shark. After that one was glued on, we then added one more that went from the engine pad around the dorsal fin. And with another belt buckle in between, we'll add it back to the other engine pad. Then on the other side of the pad, parallel to the belt we just added, we continue with another belt that will then be glued around the ventral fin and led back to the pad where we first started. Now that we got all of the accessories added, it's time to go back to the base, grab an NFC chip, add some super glue, and add it into the specific hole within the MEGAmiibo base. Before we glue the waves on permanently, since this will then prevent us from accessing the hole later. So with that, and a little bit of hot glue, we add the waves onto the MEGAmiibo base. And so with it in place, I start to add the dark blue acrylic paint onto the clay. Since air drying clay is so absorbent, I can use the acrylic paint as both a color and a primer. And because I also want to fill in some of the pores and the dents that were not removable with the sandpaper, unless I removed a lot of surface area, we can use the acrylic paint as a thin filler too, or at least a sort of filler. That does mean that we're going to have to be a little bit more careful about brush strokes. However, with the 5 subsequent layers, I was able to minimize visible brush strokes. Continuing with the painting, it's back to the airbrush with Master Mega so we can add this skeleton tone belly. During the airbrushing, I even grabbed our reference sheet again to make sure that we got the line in the right place. Because next we're going to use a dark gray for the top side of the shark. After that, I had already taken the time to work on his dentures with some plastic cards to make every single one of the shark teeth. Luckily for this, I decided to not make the 3 or 5 rows of teeth that shark have, so yay. This is then followed up with a recoat of the black primer on all of the belts, buckles, to be honest, all of the other accessories. After which I mixed a dragon's red with a skin tone to make for the perfect pink for his mouth. Paying extra attention to get a nice smooth line in front of the teeth. Luckily, these teeth still need to be painted themselves, so we can be a little bit sloppy with them. What we cannot be sloppy with is the black that we're going to need to add to the eye. Followed up with that same black used for the glasses. And lastly, the handlebars. And some nostrils for Master Mega. After that black, we use a stone grey for a little accent on the grey tips of his fins. Blending the edges slowly into the rest of the grey, since once it dries, it really fades back into the rest of the greys. Like, the final result, that's even 2 or 3 coats of this stuff. And so Master Mega finally has enough coats of color onto him that it literally forces us to let him dry first. So we can grab Shiver and start to apply her colors. Starting with this light peach for her skin. And after 3 coats of that, we grab a dragon's red for her tongue and the soles of her shoes. And by mixing in some dark brown, we can get a nice red for the leather of the seat. While that dries on top, we can also get started with the bright silver around the shark. Like all of the belt buckles. And the fronts of the jet engines. Or, more specifically, those EVA foam parts. Making sure to not have too much paint on the brush once we get to the front, to leave the black in the recesses. Once the seat is dry, we can then also use a light brown for the wooden plank at the backrest. And with that added, we get the clear to also add the bright silver to some parts of the seat. Which also means that we're going to have to add the silver to Shiver's handlebar too. Back again to the shark. Next we use a gunmetal for the rest of the metallic details on the seat, like the armrests and the backpipe. But also not forgetting about the rest of the engines. Then I used a little bit more of the same dark gray as we used for the skin to use this for the details on the sleeping mask, including the full top layer and the little stitches that surround it. Then we add some green details to the blinkers on both sides of the seat, and the green part of the speedometer that I added below the handlebars. Then we finish this off with a black needle balancing dangerously close to the red. While we are already working with the black, I then also added to the sides of Shiver's fan, also to the holes underneath her shoes, and even her leggings. By first establishing the two ribs on her right hip, I then go around her waist to where it meets her skin, after which I can just go to town covering the rest of her legs. Although I'm still careful not to cover the little bit of skin that she has at the end of her leggings, before I can go and also paint the tops of her shoes, even touching up a little bit of the black on the handle. I even poured a little bit into the airbrush to create a shadow in the back of the mouth to create the effect that there's more depth there.
Sure.
Next we have to go a little bit back in time to where we first added the white for Shiver's eyes, on her chest wrap, and the rope around the tentacle. Then we have the mask, and lastly we paint the fan itself. So, back in the present, we can use this same white on the teeth of Master Mega. Then, after we had added these brown tips, I then used the gold for the rest of the frames of the glasses.
I love gold!
I first paint the edges of the frames, so I can use this as a jumping off point to make sure that the front of the glasses don't get too thick a frame, since that's pretty easy to do if you don't watch out. Then some more dark gray is used for these two lines that go across all of the belts. And then back to Shiver, with the next task being the application of her Cheeto dust fingers, using a mix of orange and red paint at the tips of her fingers, the ends of her ears, and these are then flowed back into the peach skin tone by using a redder skin tone as a transition color. And lastly, we use this same red-orange for the mascara around her eyes. Once that's dry, with the most accuracy I can muster, I add the thin eye mask around her eye and add the pupil. Then we clean the brush and I use a bright red once more to add the markings onto the mask. Then we can finally go back to Master Mega. I can add this respawn point that I made from one half of a punch button and an EVA foam bottom. And this I then covered with a very special paint. So tip, keep an eye out for that during the final reveal. With that on, we used the airbrush one more time to paint the burnt marks into the metal ends of the jet engines. With a dark blue base, followed up with a purple pink end to represent the discoloring of the metal from all of the heat that the engines have endured over some time. We add the infinity iris onto Shiver's eyes. And with the blue logo already applied, we then use a thin brush to add some of the white tissue lines onto the lower half of Shiver's fan. Then I get to paint another set of deep cut logos. This time with a light blue variant onto the dark blue waves underneath Master Mega. Yippee! After all of that, and a well-deserved coffee break, I can use that same type of blue for the top of Shiver's tentacles. Oh no, I left the camera on autofocus. No. Oh, yeah. Well, at least I did it correctly when we added the dark blue gradient onto the tips of our tentacles. I was even able to add some light blue rings on top of that. And then, with Shiver as good as done, I've been able to cut a little piece of transparent plastic into the shape of her poncho. This I then shaped using a lighter around the figure, and now I can finish it off with some transparent blue paints through the airbrush to color the plastic. Then I need to carefully weave the brittle plastic around Shiver, after which I superglue it in place by only adding a little bit of glue via a toothpick. And then I add some accelerator to not only speed it up, but also to try and stop superglue from spreading that superglue mist that always forms on plastic. Yeah, this seemed to work. Maybe it's because I also did a little touch up with the transparent blue, but let's go with the good assumption. We are finally good to go to add Shiver's badge by dipping it into the same little puddle of superglue that we used for the toothpick and add it onto the poncho. With a perfect Shiver finally done and Master Mega ready to go, we can at last superglue her onto the seat. With some superglue on her butt, her left foot and the steering stick, we add some accelerator onto the matching places and pressure down. Then it's the turn for Master Mega and the wave. So we place him down, note where we need to add the glue, then we add the glue, and press him in place. Anyway, with everyone now stuck in place, we can finally start to add the varnishes. Starting with a gloss on Shiver's eyes, brow, and her tentacles. Then we also do our poncho. Then for Master Mega, we start with the speedometer. Next we do his stylish sunglasses and the respawner. Then we also add it on both of his eyes. And then an ice coat is also added onto everything in his mouth. Then a little bit was used on the heat damage on the engines to give back that little bit of metallic shine. And then we added the gloss to the ink. But this was when we realized that the storage of our camera was full. So back we are for the matte coating. Again, just like with Big Man, I wanted to get some reflectiveness, but not make it totally wet and shiny. So we used this matte varnish for the skin of Master Mega. Now we do need to be careful around some parts that I had already varnished with the gloss. Fair, but I still needed to be extra careful here. Hey! Oh well, look at it like this. With the final application of the matte varnish, we can officially announce the Cold-Blooded Bandit Shiver MEGAmiibo finished.
Hey Creagears, Roboy here, and we hope you enjoyed the reveal of our second MEGAmiibo, the Cold-Blooded Bandit. We also hope that you liked the part of the application of the NFC chip into the MEGAmiibo base. I'm trying my best to add some more normal speed segments to videos to rely less on all of the time lapses, to hopefully make the videos a little bit easier to follow. Because we do know that especially some of the high speed segments can be hard to follow. And since the whole core of the channel is helping you guys understand and break down these kinds of projects to try to do them yourself and explore your creative spirit, it does seem like the right direction to take. That was a sentence. Although it's not gonna be an easy and immediate change, since it's harder than I thought to plan out these scenarios, especially since it's so different from my usual recording style. So, because of all of this, hopefully by the start of the new year, I'll be able to start with the new way of recording videos. So hopefully you'll support us as we evolve further towards the new year.
But speaking of those deadlines, it's probably best if I get back to those as soon as possible. So, keep those gears turning, and we will see you guys in the final Frye MEGAmiibo video.